you ready to write? Do you want to learn what it takes to create a writing career? Then tune in and take notes because on Simply Write, we talk about the writer's craft and the qualities and quirks of living a writer's life. Let's go! Hello and welcome to Simply Write with Polly Campbell. This is Polly, and this is the podcast where we talk about the writer's craft and crafting a writer's life. And so many of us come to this profession after living a big life doing other things, right? Raising a family, having other careers, living abroad, whatever it is, we bring those experiences to our work, whether it's the internal landscape or the external. And today's guest has done just that. We've got Michael Hearns here today. He's a Miami native and a former South Florida police officer and detective who spent a decade as an undercover officer in the Medellin and Cali drug cartels, investigating large-scale cocaine trafficking and money laundering cases. He's a certified DEA instructor, and he works and consults on as a technical advisor on major motion pictures and television shows. He's consulted on homicide cases. He's a movie producer, professor. Welcome to the show, Michael Hearns. You've done just about everything, it seems like.
Everything but join the circus, I guess, right?
That's next. There's still time. And you have taken all this and created a series of novels and a new genre, which I want to talk about. You call it Dark Tropic, and that's through your books. Books like Trust No One, Grasping Smoke, and the newest, Choices and Chances. Michael, we start every show with the dailies. How do you get all this done? What does your daily schedule look like, and how do you bring the writing into it?
You know, I don't know if I can fully answer that question in a very articulate manner, because I'm sure many of your other guests have very tried and true formulas for their work, their success, whatever it is they're doing, their endeavors. I just kind of jump in. I don't really have a fully fleshed out, 10 a.m. to 10:30, this is going to happen, 11:15 to 12:45, that's going to happen. I don't have that rigidity, i.e. maybe it's discipline, I don't know, but I just kind of push in and see where it goes.
Are you writing every day?
I try to write every day. For me, the writing is almost like a zeitgeist. It becomes a spirit that I have to take on. And there's many times, days, sometimes even weeks where I'm not writing. And I don't really consider that to be writer's block. It's just that life intrudes. And sometimes there are things going on that we have to do. Once the machine starts to get oiled and once the machine starts to rev, if I'm in the flow, then it becomes a daily occurrence. Many times it's out of respect for the family unit, I will wake up at say 2:30 in the morning and say, oh, I want to do this. And I go, no, what? I'm just going to stay here till 7 a.m. and then I'll do it. But by and large, it becomes almost an infectious mode. And then it becomes more of it's a journey, of course. It's not so much that it's a task, but nonetheless, it's still something that has to get done and has to get completed. And I look at it in segments and in blocks, and I say to myself, okay, if I get, I'm at 100 pages, I need to do X amount of pages more. And then I'm at X amount of words. And I start to look at the actual calendar and say, okay, it's December, it's February, it's March, whatever it may be. When is a good time to release this book? And I start to kind of compress, push, and mold all those things together and come up with my timeline.
When you say your timeline, you're self-publishing, is that right?
Yes, I'm self-published, but I also own the company, and I do other things besides just these books.
And so when you set the timeline, are you building into account the time for the cover design and the editing and all of those things? And then once you're far enough down in the book and you have the timeline set, you're just going? Is that how it works?
Yeah, it's all hands on deck. But what I've learned through this process of now having 4 novels under my belt is that there will come a time when I don't control the timeline. I will make an assumption that the book will go to the editor and it will come back in, X amount of time. And it turns out to be triple X amount of time. And then that throws things off. And then there's the consultation with the artist for the book cover and the template and what size is it going to be? And, last book was this color. We want to stay in the same color scheme. Do we want the same topical theme across these covers? Do you want these books to stand out that when they see it, they'll recognize it's one of my books? So all that goes into it. So in answer to your question, yeah, I think I'm controlling time, just like we all think we're controlling our lives. But we realize at some point that there's a lot of things that are not in our control.
When did you make the decision that, fine, I'm going to be a writer, and this is the next aspect of my career as a professional, not just a hobby?
Yeah, well, it was a lot of research and a lot of knowledge gleaned to understand how to do things. Imitation is a great form of flattery. And I saw other authors and other books that were out there, and I recognized what was necessary and what was needed to put out a professional product. Today's readers are becoming smaller and smaller. And what I mean by that is that we become such a visually intense society with our phones and our tablets and our computers that readers are truthfully becoming entities unto themselves. And you don't want to insult them by slapping together something in your garage, put your name across of it, and calling it a book simply because it has the form and function of a book. You want to give them what they expect. They expect a certain amount of pages. They expect a certain amount of content. They expect some sort of compelling story. And they also want, and they're tactile. They want to hold that book, even if it's an e-version. They still want to feel that the money they invested in purchasing the book was well worth it and not some sort of something, once again, as I said, that you slap together in your garage. So yes, everything goes to U.S. Congress, copyrights and ISBN numbers and barcodes and artwork and font. All that stuff is on par with everybody and everything else.
You're bending the genre. Tell me what dark tropic is.
Well, the genres is that regionally we have certain authors who have incorporated the region of the country they're in to facilitate their story and facilitate their craft. A good example would be Michael Connelly, who writes his Harry Bosch novels, and they're all set in Los Angeles. And the book covers, the storylines, the actuality of those books all deeply reflect Los Angeles. Here in South Florida, we have some very notable writers who came before me, and I would hate to even put my name in the same sentence with them, but you have people like Carl Hyacin and Edna Buchanan and Charles Willeford. And these individuals blazed a trail about Florida literature and Florida characters. So my character, Detective Cade Taylor, is a Miami detective, and it was incumbent upon me to, if not carry that torch, at least keep the flame alight. And so we sometimes think when we hear about Carl Hyacin or Dave Barry as having these very zany, quote unquote, Florida man stories, that this can't be true. I can tell you as a native Floridian, those are all true stories. So what we see oftentimes in television, it could be CSI Miami, it could be Miami Vice, it could be anything that's filmed in South Florida. We see bright colors. We see, the reason why Miami Vice was so popular is that the natural light of South Florida made those pastels pop on your television screen. But what people not recognize oftentimes is that in those shadows, in those shadows of the large buildings and the palm trees, there is some nefarious activity. There is crime. There is things going on that are not very savory. And that's where the genre dark tropics comes from. Cade Taylor is a detective in Miami, Florida, and he's vexed with these very serious, complex, and he's dealing with this in the shadow of all this brightness, in the shadow of all this glitz and glamour and all this tropical splendor. He's in the darkness doing these things. So that's where the genre dark tropics comes from.
And you've worked in the darkness a little bit too, as a South Florida resident. How does a guy who is at the top of his field as a detective and undercover with the world's biggest drug cartels at the time, get quiet and actually write a detective fiction novel. Was it hard to settle in to writing after such a, loud and dangerous career?
Well, you're right what you know. And part of the recoiling, part of the drawback, the drawing back, coming physically back from the epicenter, from the abyss, is reflection. And in that reflection, I felt that I could tell some compelling stories, and in doing so, created the fictional character Cade Taylor. But what we oftentimes see in our life is we see a lot of television shows about police work and law enforcement. Therefore, we oftentimes think we understand that. But not many people truthfully understand the world of undercover money laundering or undercover cocaine trafficking. And this is the world that Cade Taylor is primarily in, although he does have to deal many times with homicides and other things. So I'm trying to bring in these elements that we think we know about, but we really don't know about. And also the fact that crime is crime is complex, and crime is evident across, all of our borders of our country. But in South Florida, we have this nuance that sometimes is a little different than other places. Doesn't mean it's better, doesn't mean it's, something that someone else couldn't handle. But, we have to understand things like voodoo and Santeria and drug trafficking and geopoliticism and the whole landscape of that. And so Kay Taylor, and through these books, brings you, the reader, into that world. And I try to illuminate what it was like to live like that. And not many people fully understand it. So I try to bring that world into it.
Well, I think it's fascinating. I have more questions about how you do that. We're going to take a short break and come right back with Michael Hearns, the author of Choices and Chances, and more in the Cade Taylor series right here on Simply Right. Welcome back. You're listening to Simply Right with Polly Campbell and Michael Hearns here today. He is the author of detective fiction books like Trust No One, Grasping Smoke, and his newest Choices and Chances, the Cade Taylor series. And Michael, before we went to break, we were talking about how you merge your career as an undercover officer dealing with money laundering and drug cartels and consulting on homicides at times as a veteran police officer in with the writing. Now, I would imagine going undercover requires some imagination to respond to the moments that you're in as a detective or an undercover agent. Is there anything that police work has in common with writing? Do you have to be able to be agile in your thinking to do both these jobs?
I don't know if you have to be agile in your thinking to do both of them. I think that we as humans can be very multifaceted in what we do. I think the main thing is learn to excel to your best capabilities of what it is you are doing. But one of the other things also is understand your limitations. I never did anything in my career that I didn't feel I was going to excel at. I would have been a terrible motorcycle police officer. I would have been a terrible canine officer. So I never, ever even tried to do those things because I knew what would work for me. And as a writer, I don't foresee myself writing a romance novel. I don't foresee myself writing a how-to business model of books. I kind of stay in my frame and I stay in my lane. And I think that one of the things that the takeaway is try to excel at what you do, but also know your limitations. And that will help you to hone your craft to the best of your ability.
I run into writers all the time who see something that's hot in the marketplace, right? Oh, everybody's buying romance or everybody's buying vampire thrillers or whatever it is. And they try to write to that, whether they have experience or they know what they're doing or they've practiced that. And we all know that market's going to change in a couple of years. So what you're saying is find what you like, what you know, what you're good at, and practice doing that until you elevate your craft in that area and stay in your lane so that you can be good at whatever you're choosing to take on.
Yeah. And one of the things about the Cade Taylor novels is that they're very authentic. Everything he does, everything that happens in the book is real. Every street they drive on, every restaurant they walk into, even the timeline. If I say in the book that there's going to be a Miami Dolphin game or something, there truthfully was a game that day. So you can almost read my books and know exactly not only what year it was, but what day it was. And my books also don't hopscotch over time. Monday becomes Tuesday, Tuesday becomes Wednesday. You wake up with Cade Taylor, you go to bed with Cade Taylor, and it all starts all over again. There is no, oh, 6 weeks later, this happened. And so for many readers, Miami is a city much like Los Angeles, Chicago, New York. You may not live there, but you've at least visited probably. So it elicits a little bit of a synapses in the brain when people see this and go, oh, I remember that place, or I heard about that place, or I used to go to that place. Everything's real. There is no Maple Street and then Elm Street and Spruce Street. Everything is authentic and real. And so the work that Cade Taylor does and the way the work gets done and the way the cases get solved oftentimes, if not every time, follow authentic protocols throughout the whole thing. Now, we understand that everyone's career and job can sometimes be rote and they're even sometimes boring. These books are not boring. They're actually very action driven, but I bring you into the realistic aspect of what it's like to be a vice intelligence narcotic detective in Miami, Florida.
The grind of it sometimes.
Not just the grind of it, the emotional toil, the uncertainty of your position in this whole equation, the doubt of your abilities, the doubt of the probable outcome of something being favorable. Cade Taylor is vexed with a lot of these emotions, and he's coming off of a rather nasty divorce. He's challenged by other things, yet he still perseveres. You know, he stays in the fight. And that's what I think the readers, at least what they tell me they love about Cade Taylor, is that he's not perfect. He's jaded. He's sardonic. He's a little rough around the edges, but he has a true conviction of his own moral code, and he stays in that fight throughout the entire book.
Your answer is interesting to me because when I asked that question, I was heading down the Miami streets and the external effects, and you answered on the emotional level of your character. So obviously for you, it's important to have both. You want him to have some emotional resonance for the readers and be authentic in that way as much as you want the streets in Miami to be correct then.
Well, Miami plays a character in these books almost as much as any individual does. And the books are written in the first person. So many readers feel like they're in the situation with Cade Taylor. There is no third-party narrative directing you what's going on. You're hearing about it through Cade, and you're also hearing about it through his thought process. You know, my editor had said to me, you know, he drove down this road and he made a turn. I couldn't figure out what he was going. Then I realized this is how he processes. And
Mm.
so you're with Cade in the conversations, you're with Cade in the action, you're with Cade in the case development, but you're also with Cade when he's in the shower and he's reflecting on what could have happened that day, and he starts to have shakes and tears and feels the vulnerability of where his life is careening, sometimes out of control and sometimes in a controlled spin, but he's in this crazy world. Cade's life is much like a hurricane. He's in the center. And the center of a hurricane, and the eye of a hurricane is very calm, but everything spinning around him is all debris and carnage. And it's when he steps out of that center and he goes into this debris and carnage, and he realizes that, you know, he's not living a normal life. Not everyone has the type of career and job that he has. There are plenty of police officers. There are plenty of plumbers. There are plenty of electricians, but there are very few people who are undercover in a very large drug cartel geopolitical situation that only he can fully understand. Even the people he deals with, his immediate supervisor, doesn't fully understand what it is he does, because this isn't something you learn in the police academy. This isn't something you learn from a book, unless you start reading my novels. But this isn't something that is taught. This is something that is basically on the job training that he's had to learn and also excel at.
I think that makes characters so much more interesting. One of the challenges of writing crime fiction is to not just go to action all the time, right? Because we are moving faster in the world now, and we are so prone to go to the next shiny thing. But the reason why we care about the characters is because of what you're doing. You're giving him some emotional depth that we can relate to too. We can understand what it's like to go through a divorce or be afraid. And I think that really makes the books relevant and interesting. I appreciate that you do that. I think it's hard to write that way. Is it hard to write the emotional aspects?
It's hard to write the emotional aspects because sometimes the author, have to dip back into my past and recall some of those repressed, suppressed, parked emotions and thought processes. Also, the books take place in 1998. I'm working my way towards a 9/11 situation as these books move. And so therefore, a lot of the things he's dealing with are very elementary to all of us. But back then, he didn't fully understand how the internet fully works. He didn't fully understand how a lot of stuff, the technology we have now that's on the forefront. So, the vehicles he drives, the cell phones he uses are all reflective of that time period. And I have to be very careful because many readers will read a novel and go, they didn't have that kind of cell phone in December. And, one thing that in the book Grasping Smoke, there's a scene where they go to take out their cell phone cameras and take a picture of the homicide scene. And then I realized the cell phone cameras didn't come out for another 45 days. 45 days. So I had to retool, make it a Polaroid camera to keep it authentic.
How do you do that research? Are you on the internet? Are you talking to people from the time? Are you remembering?
Well, a couple of things. Absolutely, Polly. Everything you just said is correct. I lived it. I do research. I do pick up things. I'm one of those people who I absorb everything. I learn something from everybody. Everybody I talk to, everybody I meet, I pick something up from them. But the other thing is I research title charts. I research moon phases. When they go to a restaurant, they don't order a just generic meal. They order something directly from the menu of that restaurant. And some of these restaurants are not even around anymore. I've had to go back into archives, research them, and see these things. So it could be a car, it could be a boat, it could be anything that's reflective of that time is 100% accurate. I do not skimp or cut the reader, and I do not make the assumption that the reader will just buy what I'm saying and go along with it. I want the reader to have this journey. I want the reader to feel immersed in this story. And I try to keep the reader engaged. And Cade Taylor, I feel, is a very engaging character. And he notices things that other people don't notice as well. He notices, it could be anything from atmospheric situations to the way someone sat at a table and what the actual intentions truthfully are. He's very intuitive. He's very street smart. Cade Taylor is very street smart. He's very intuitive. He has a good sense of humor. And he recognizes that he is in a world that many people don't understand. And he tries his hardest to live in that world, but he also has objectives and goals that he has to achieve that are quite different than most people. Cade Taylor is one of those guys who, and I lived this life, you could be at an intersection at a red light and you're waiting for the light to change. And I'm in the car next to you. And I know that, I'm following a guy who's got 8 kilograms of cocaine in the trunk, but you don't know that. So what these books do is they kind of bring you into that world that while you were living your normal life existence, all this craziness was going on, and he's bringing you into that.
We're listening to this and we're getting fired up and we're working on our own detective fiction novel. Are there any thoughts for new writers about how to keep going and how to think about this stuff?
I think I would just say go to the source, find someone or something that will not only inspire you, but help to, for lack of a better term, educate you on what that world is like. And see if you can hitch a ride on that karma, hitch a ride on that essence, and try to harness it for your own purpose. If you go into any bookstore, there are shelves and shelves about space exploration. But I think only like 18 people have ever walked on the surface of the moon. So who wrote all these books?
Yeah.
Obviously, someone is gleaning knowledge somewhere and trying to incorporate it into a book. In my case, I live this life, so it all comes into the book quite, I won't say easily, but it fits it nicely. So my recommendation or my advice would be to understand that readers are sophisticated. They're not dummies, and they understand, and they read other books and they pick up information. And if you try to go in there and bamboozle them with some sort of something that's not, we see this in television shows, all this forensic TV stuff that's truthfully not true. And then in real life cases, jurors expect to see all this forensic evidence and there isn't there. So you can't try to put something over on today's readers. They're smart people.
Yeah, and it's all out there. And to be honest, from the end of the writer, I love that kind of research. Like anytime I can go out and talk to the person who's done the thing or is doing the thing, and I get caught up in their passion, it just plays with my imagination. It brings all sorts of questions out. It creates opportunities in my life. I think so much of writing is doing the things that you're talking about before and during the actual writing process, being in the world and living in the world and connecting with each other in these ways so that you can be accurate and be true to the characters in the story. This brings us to my favorite segment, Michael Hearns. What's in the desk? What tool or trinket do you have around you, if anything at all, when you write?
Well, for the longest time, my wife and I shared a home office, and it was a large farm table. And she has her own company, and she would be with clients in Zoom conferences and stuff with her earbuds in. And I would put in my earbuds and I would write for two reasons. I would listen to music when I write, and I would I'd try to give her the privacy that her clients and she deserve. And also I didn't want to get, into her conversations while I'm trying to do my own thing. And at the end of the day, we would both adjourn from the office, and I would say to her, how was your day? And she'd tell me about her clients and such. And then she would ask me, what did you do today? And I'd say, I was killing people. So I guess one of the things I used to have next to me when I wrote was my wife.
Well, your wife
Was a great muse, and I enjoyed having her there. And as far as trinkets and such, I'm not overly compulsive, but I like a very neat environment. So my desk situation when I write is rather sparse. Keyboard, computer, mouse, maybe I have a little sphere. It looks like the Las Vegas sphere. It's just that it's like a charcoal black, and you spin it. And my son, who's in another city, my adult son has one, and I would spin it because it was my way of feeling connected to him. But aside from that, I really don't have motivational posters or the soccer jersey I wore in high school. No, I don't have any stuff like that.
Michael Hearns is the author of the Cade Taylor series, including Choices and Chances and Trust No One. Michael, this has been a great discussion. Where can we find your books? Where can we track you down?
Yes, michaelhearns.com is the website. There also is an author Facebook page, author Michael Hearns. There's Instagram, Michael Hearns on Instagram. On Twitter, there's about 10,000 followers on Twitter. And by and large, that's one of the best ways to follow along. The books can be found anywhere. They may not always be on every shelf of every bookstore, but they're in their catalog. If you were to ask the person at the bookstore to look it up by name, title, or by my name, they could get it for you. I don't ever try to advocate one over the other. I recognize that my books are in Walmart, Target, Amazon. They can be found, England, Australia, but also your independent bookstores. My wife and I were in a bookstore just yesterday, and there's just something magical about being in a bookstore surrounded by all that work.
All that work, all that
all that work,
energy.
all that
Yeah.
energy. Yeah,
I,
exactly.
I agree. I mean, it still gives me chills. It's amazing what people are out there doing. It's fantastic work, a lot of it. And I do that all the time. I buy books from all over the place, but I go to my little shop and I will just tell them what I'm looking for and they'll get it for me if it's not on the shelf. So
Yeah.
don't be afraid to do that. Buy the books, right? Buy the books. Michael Hearns, it's fantastic to have you here. And I will have links to Michael and his work on my Substack. It's simplywrite.substack.com. Be part of the community there where we talk about the writing craft and crafting the writer's life. And now, writers, it's time to get to work. And now, as we head into the week, remember the words of Ray Bradbury. He says, you must stay drunk on writing so reality cannot destroy you. Now sit down, writers, and simply write.